Hi, I'm James Catherall. I'm a co-founder of Catherall Audio. Today we're going to be talking about the top 10 MainStage patches that I use most often. So this list isn't going to be in any particular order. This is just going to be a list of 10 patches, which at least one always makes it into every single project that I'm working on. And all of the ones we're going to discuss are all stock patches and sounds that come built in with MainStage when you purchase it. So let's take a look inside of MainStage. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I have all of the sounds downloaded. So I'm going to go up to this top MainStage tab, and then I'm going to go to Sound Library, and you can probably just select Download All Available Sounds. This download is pretty big. At the time of this recording, there's about 70 gigabytes total of sounds and instruments that come with MainStage. So make sure that when you do this, you give yourself time for all of those to download before you need to use MainStage again. If you don't have all of that available space on your computer, what you can also do is go to the Open Sound Library Manager, and this will let you pick and choose what instruments and sounds you're going to download. Some of the things right away that you can probably cross off is not downloading the Apple loops, just because you're probably not going to need to use that inside of MainStage. And then once you've made your selection, then click Install. Let's talk about one more thing before we get started with this list. There are hundreds of instruments and thousands of presets, and on top of that, a whole list of effects that you can use to help craft your own sounds. So this video isn't really meant to act as a definitive list of patches that everyone should be using in MainStage. These are really just my favorites that hopefully you can use as a jumping off point when you're building your MainStage concerts. What I really suggest is to take the time to dig through all of the sounds and patches, find the ones that you like best, and start building your own unique sonic palette. And with that, let's get started. So for number one, I went with the harp sound. You can find this harp sound in the channel strip library. If you go to the orchestral folder and then harp, and then you can double click this and this will load the harp channel strip. The only things I'll really tweak is in the EQ. I might pull down some of the high end just to give a little bit more warmth to the sound, or I might even boost the high end in some circumstances if I want a little bit more air to the sound. The other thing I'll do, and this is pretty common among a lot of the sounds that I use, is I'll add a little bit of reverb just to make sure that it's not completely dry, and that can help fill out the sound just a little bit. Now let's listen to what that harp sounds like. For number two, I went with the full string sound. You can find this in the channel strip library. If you go under the orchestral folder again, and then go to strings, and then go to full strings, you can double click this and that'll load the channel strip. In here, the only things I really change is going into the EQ. I'll boost some of the low or lower mids, and then also some of the highs. That low mids will help give me some warmth and fullness, and then the highs can give me some of that air again, as well as giving me that sound of the bow contacting the strings that I think is really nice. That gives it a nice real quality to it. And then I'll also add a little bit of reverb as well. So now let's listen to what the full strings sound like. I like the full strings because it's a very versatile instrument that can fit in a broad range of musical moments and help add some support. So number three isn't really a patch, it's more of almost kind of like a secret sound that you might not know exists. If you bring up the sampler in MainStage and leave it empty, it actually produces a sine wave that you can use. So here I have the sampler open, I have it left as the user default with nothing loaded in it. The only thing I'll really change on this is looking at the amplitude envelope. I'll bring the attack up and I'll bring the release up. And I'll usually change those based off of the musical circumstances to help it blend with whatever else is happening around it. I'll also usually tune the instrument down an octave so it really gets into those sub frequencies and it has that felt but not heard type of quality to it. I'm going to play the sine wave a little bit so you can get an idea of what it sounds like by itself. I would suggest using headphones for this part. If you're just using your laptop or your phone speakers, this part is probably going to end up silent because it can't actually reach down to those sub frequencies. Here's what that sine wave sounds like. I view the sine wave as my secret weapon. It adds a lot of weight and power to the sound, and it works well because it's just a pure tone. It blends well with a wide range of instruments. So I can use it with strings patches or choir patches. It even works well in an ensemble setting. If I have a large ensemble and I want a big moment, I can add just the sine wave by itself to help assist those acoustic instruments and help reach a range that's not really possible without that sine wave. I'm going to go back and add it with the full string so you can get an idea of what that sounds like altogether. So you can see compared to when we just played the full strings by itself earlier, when I add in that sine wave, it really adds in that low depth and that low warmth to the sound. For number 4, I went with this bell sphere sound. You can find this in the sampler. If I go up here to this preset area and I click on the drop down menu, go to Factory, Synthesizers, and then Pads, up here at the top we'll see Bell Sphere Basic, and that's what I go with. I like using the bell sphere a lot because it's a pretty straightforward synth bell type of sound that blends well with a lot of different instruments. And I think it works best paired with any melodic content that you have. It can add a lot of great support to that sound. So let's check out what that sounds like. At number 5, I went with the Purity patch. You can find this in the ES2 synthesizer in MainStage. If you go under the presets drop-down menu, under Synth Pads, you'll find Purity. One of the first things I usually do with this is pull the release down. I think the default release on this is a little bit too high, and it tends to muddy up the sound a little bit when you're moving between a lot of different chords. So I think that the Purity sound is a great synth pad that works well pairing with your harmonic content and can be a great support for all of your different chords and harmonies in your music. So let's listen to what it sounds like. At number 6, I went with the thumb bass. I think it's a great low-end instrument that can add a lot of support to your moving lines and works great if you don't have a bass player in your ensemble, but you still want that type of sound. You can find the thumb bass in the channel strip library if you go under the bass folder, and then right here is the thumb bass. You can double click on that to add it in. I think one of the only things I really play around with in this one is the exciter. I'll go there, and this one can help add some of those upper harmonics to an instrument. So sometimes I'll have this on so it can really help it cut through the ensemble just a little bit more if I need it. So now let's listen to what the thumb bass sounds like. For number 7, I went with the house bass. You can find it in the EFM1 synthesizer in MainStage. I go up to the presets drop-down menu, and under FM bass, I'll see house bass right there. Usually the only things I'll really tweak on this is this FM knob. I can pull that up or down to add or remove some of the harmonics from the sound. Sometimes I'll mess with this stereo detune to add some thickness to the sound. And then I'll also usually pull the release up maybe just a little bit, and that kind of gives it that more like open plucked bass string type of sound. So it has a little bit more of a ring and a release to it. And then I'll also usually go in the EQ and I'll roll off a lot of the highs just so it has that really low warm sound. I think the house bass works really well to give you some of those cinematic driving bass lines that really helps give a lot of momentum to your music. So let's check out what that sounds like. For number 8, I went with the Bosendorfer piano. I had to make sure that there was a piano in this top 10. I couldn't create a list like this without having a piano somewhere in this list. So for this one, I chose that Bosendorfer. I think it works really well because it has a nice warm sound to it and it has a really deep, full, low end for when I want those types of sounds from the piano. You can find the Bosendorfer in the channel strip library under the piano folder, and then right there is the Bosendorfer. Usually the only things I really tweak with this is in the EQ. I'll pull up some of those lows just because I really like that warm piano type of sound. And then I'll also pull up a little bit of the highs just to give it some of that high airy quality as well. I also usually add just a little bit of reverb to also help give it a little bit of life. So let's listen to this Bosendorfer piano. For number 9, I went with the Dark Choir. I think this one adds a nice cinematic support to your sound. So you can find the Dark Choir by going to the channel strip library, and you want to start by going all the way down to the Legacy folder, and then the Logic folder, and then Synthesizers, Warped Voices, and then finally you'll find the Dark Choir right here, and you can double click that to load it in. By default, it comes with a lot of reverb on it that I tend to turn down. I go into the Space Designer and I pull down the tail of this reverb quite a bit. And then it also has this Guitar Amp Pro that also comes with a reverb down here, and I'll pull that down as well, just so it's not too washed out. In the EQ, I'll also boost up some of the lows, but then I'll pull down some of the mids and then pull up the highs. And I think that helps give it some clarity so it's not too muddy. Same thing with the exciter as well, as I'll use that to add in some harmonics to add in some of that upper clarity as well. So now let's listen to the Dark Choir and get an idea of what that sounds like. Finally, the last one I'm going to go with is a bit of a broad sound. We're going to be looking inside of Alchemy and picking out soundscapes. I think that Alchemy is one of the best plugins that comes inside of MainStage, and it can serve a similar purpose to Omnisphere. If you've never used Omnisphere before, I would highly suggest checking it out. It's a really robust synthesizer that's basically one of the top 3 plugins that everyone uses across all different musical genres. But it has a pretty hefty price tag at $500. So if you're not ready to dive in and drop that $500 for Omnisphere, Alchemy is a great option to replace Omnisphere. So let's take a look at what we can do inside of Alchemy. I'm going to open up the interface right here. And when you open it up, you're going to see this Browse tab by default, and it's going to show you how you can select sounds. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to Soundscapes under Categories, and then I'm going to leave everything else at All. And it comes with a lot of presets already. Even just in the Soundscapes by itself, there's 523 different presets that we can look at. And in total, there's thousands of presets inside of Alchemy that you can search through and find a bunch of different sounds to fit what you need. For me, I really like this soundscape space because it makes it easy to find some really cool drones that I can add inside of my music and find some really cool textures as well. So let's start here in this list, and we'll just go with the abandoned space station and let's try it. One of the things you want to be careful of inside of Alchemy is just finding the right sounds. Some of them can be a little bit overproduced and a little too busy to really fit into a lot of musical elements. So like if we go down here to this air and water sound, you can listen to this. So it's often just a little bit too busy to really work well in what we want to try and do. I think one of the other great things of Alchemy is we can pick any of these presets. Like we can try Alchemy in Wonderland, and we can see what that sounds like. And with that sound, if we don't really love it, we can also go down here and there's 8 sub presets. So this sticks with the same main sound, but it tweaks some of the parameters of the instrument to make it sound a little bit different. So we can click on some of these different buttons and see how it changes it. So we can see how that already makes a big difference to the preset. And we can also click and drag this box, and we can see how it kind of morphs between the different sounds. If we look at all those different knobs, it kind of slowly morphs between these different sub presets to change the sound even more. So I really like that ability to really tweak the sounds the way that I want to. The other thing we can do to find some quick sounds that we need is use all these different tags to find different sounds. So I can go with soundscapes, and then let's go with drones, and then ambient, and then let's try and stick with just simple sounds. And here we go, it brings up 10 presets. So this gives me a much smaller category to deal with. So let's try this calm sunrise. There we go, that's pretty cool. I actually like that one a lot. And we can move it around and see if we like any of these other parts of it. So Alchemy can make it really easy to find a lot of really cool soundscapes and textures to add into your music just by using all those different categories and quickly finding the right sounds that you want. Alchemy is a pretty robust synthesizer that has a lot of features under the hood that you can dive into and get lost in for a long time. So I think it's a really great one to really set some time aside and dive through all of the different presets, go into the advanced tab and look through all the different knobs and faders that you can play with and build your own types of sounds. And that'll close out our top 10 MainStage patch list. Do you disagree with any of my choices? Let me know in the comments down below what your top 10 MainStage patches are. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you have any MainStage topics you'd like for us to cover in the future, leave that in the comments down below. And we'll see you in the next one.